Hi, today we are going to discuss basic concepts of biodiversity. Biodiversity is life on earth. Biodiversity or biological diversity refers to the different myriads of life forms found in the earth. It's a legacy of billions of years of evolution shaped through natural process and human activity. In another way, I can say that biodiversity is our life insurance. We share this planet with millions of species, plant, animals, microbes, and we are dependent on them for our biological needs, day-to-day needs. Biodiversity directly provides us food, for example, different type of crops like maize, rice, etc. Fuel, fodder, pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, genetic resources, etc. These are the direct benefits which we get from the biodiversity. The indirect benefit are soil, formation of soil, climate regulation, fresh air, water, and many other tangible and intangible benefits we get from biodiversity. Biodiversity is variety and variability of living organism, whether it's in terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, aerial ecosystem, or inter alia ecosystem. It is the diversity of species, of genes, of ecosystem. Biodiversity is of immense importance. It is a foundation for our sustainable livelihood and security. So, today in this session, the learning outcomes of this session are you will be understanding or you will be able to explain the concept of biodiversity and brief history, definitions of biodiversity, 3 levels of biodiversity, genetic, species and ecosystem, measuring biodiversity and different scopes of biodiversity study. As I have told you, biodiversity is variety of life on earth. It's the variety and variability of different life forms on earth, whether it's plants, animals, microbes. The variety and variability are found in different ecosystems. We found that this diversity, these life forms are found in all the ecosystem, whether it's a terrestrial ecosystem, forest, grassland, desert, or aquatic ecosystem like marine or estuaries, deep water, pond, river, or in even Antarctica or polar where extremophiles or extreme microbes are found. So this diversity is almost omnipresent. This is the variety and variability of life in which we human being, our life is dependent. If we see, the biodiversity is fast decreasing, is fast depleting. The reason is the over-exploitation of natural resources coupled with population. We know that the population is around 7 billion and it is estimated, it is predicted that up to 2050 it will be around 9 billion. So to feed so much of population, we need so much of food. We know that soil is depleting. We know that water resources are fast depleting. So in order to fulfill all these demand, we are continuously eroding our precious biodiversity without understanding that this biodiversity is life. Once the biodiversity is reached a tipping point, is reached a point where it's very difficult to revert back or come back to a condition, the earth or the life on this earth will perish, or this will lead to another mass extinction. Not because of the other mass extinction, basically they are because of climatic reason, but this mass extinction will happen due to anthropogenic activity, due to human greeds, because there is, as Mahatma Gandhi has said, there is enough for human need but not for greed. So biodiversity is variety of life on earth which we need to save. Coming to the biodiversity, the interesting point is biodiversity is not uniformly distributed. There are certain regions of the earth where biodiversity is thickly populated, or there is extraordinary biodiversity. So Norman Mayer, he has identified these areas where they are very rich in biodiversity, where the level of endemism is too high, and these areas he has identified as hotspot of biodiversity. There are 34 hotspots of biodiversity. Likewise, there are mega biodiversity center. It is very interesting. It is very happy. I mean, like, it's very fulfilling to know that India is having 4 hotspots of biodiversity and it's one of the mega biodiverse country. So most of the biodiversity of the earth is found in certain patches and it's not uniformly distributed, but these area, either it's a hotspot of biodiversity or it's mega biodiversity center or it's high area of wilderness, they all are facing the danger of extinction because of unprecedented biodiversity harvest or no conservation of biodiversity harvest or biodiversity. So biodiversity, in other words, it is an umbrella term. It is used to describe the number of variety and variability of living organism in a given assemblage. Different scientists, different conservationists, different environmentalists have given different terms to describe this. Few people say it's life on earth because without this these are the only life form on the earth. Variety of life and its processes, because if we say ecosystem biodiversity, it's includes structure as well as different ecosystem processes, ecological processes which sustain the diversity into the earth. Darwin, before the coining of the term biodiversity, he exclaimed that life of endless form, and it is also known as essence of life. So the biodiversity, variety and variability of living organism has different synonyms. It is known by different enduring words. Coming to the concept of biodiversity, biodiversity is perceived differently depending upon the sociological group. There are biologists, there are taxonomists, economists, conservationists, environmental groups, NGOs, and general public, common man. Everybody has different concept of biodiversity according to their own need. For example, biologists, they say that biodiversity is variety and variability of living forms, variety and variability which is found in terrestrial, aquatic and other aerial space, the variety of genes, species they harbor. This is the definition by biologists. If you see an agriculturist or a farmer, for him biodiversity is gaining the benefit from the soil in the sense of biological resources, in the form of different type of crops, in the form of productivity. If you see industry harbor on genetic biodiversity or biotechnological tool to harvest the genetic potential in the form of different, you can say, medicine or fish product, wood, timber, etc. For conservationists, they think biodiversity as a resource is like sustainable development has 4 chairs, like 1 chair economic, environment, social, etc. So they see that it's a entity, it's a resource that has to be saved if we wanted to save the world. For general common people, they think biodiversity is beauty. They see it's an aesthetical form. They relate it with their cultural enrichment. They relate it with their cognitive development, with art, with recreation, with ecotourism, with cultural monuments. They take biodiversity for their recreation, for their enhancement of knowledge by studying biodiversity as well. So these are different concepts by different groups, but they all are interdependent, they all are interrelated, because the ultimate aim of all these different conceptions is that how the biodiversity can be saved, can be sustainably managed, that that not only for our generation, but for the future generation also, this biodiversity can be stored, can be conserved. So, biodiversity as a concept is different for different sociological group. If we see the concept as a biological diversity, the biological diversity was first introduced in 1980 by naturalists Norsay and McManus. They were concerned about the loss of biological diversity in the tropical forest. So, they introduced the term biological diversity. Later, Walter G. Rosen in 1985, he abbreviated biological diversity as biodiversity in the planning meeting, first planning meeting of National Biodiversity Forum. So, he coined or abbreviated biological diversity as biodiversity. The proceeding of this National Forum of Biodiversity was compiled by Wilson, who is also known as father of biodiversity, in the form of a book that is called Biodiversity, is a very famous book. And after this, the biodiversity has become very popular among the scientists and among the newspaper or other people. The biodiversity at a global scale got recognition in 1992 when the Earth Summits take place in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. Here, the Convention of Biological Diversity was adopted. The Convention of Biological Diversity is the first, you can say, global agreement which address all the needs of biodiversity. The Convention of Biological Diversity, India is a party of Convention of Biological Diversity. So, this Convention of Biological Diversity, after this, it has given widespread publicity to biodiversity, its importance, its value, its importance to the human beings or all the ecosystem for maintaining the earth or its ecological processes. So, biodiversity, the Convention of Biodiversity is having various conference of parties, and India has hosted the 11th conference of party in Hyderabad in 2012, which is very significant because 2012 was the 20th anniversary of this Convention of Biodiversity, which was adopted in Rio de Janeiro. So, according to Convention of Biological Diversity, it's defined in Article 2, the biodiversity is variety, the variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystem, and the ecological complexes of which they are part. This includes diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystem. In other words, diversity within species means genetic diversity. Diversity between species means species diversity, and of ecosystem is ecosystem diversity or landscape diversity. So, it encompasses, this definition encompasses the all type of biodiversity and the habitat, the ecological complexes or the ecosystem they are part of it. The Convention of Biological Diversity has three main objectives. One, conservation of biodiversity. Number two, sustainable use of the resources. And third, fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of this genetic resources. So, Convention of Biological Diversity is the global agreement which has given biodiversity is a very good recognition among scientists, and the importance of biodiversity is now known to everybody. The direct or indirect benefits we get, the tangible and intangible benefit we get, extrinsic or intrinsic value, consumptive value, productive value, all this is now known to everybody. Biodiversity, as I told, that it provides the sustainable livelihood. It underpins the ecosystem services. There are different type of ecosystem services like provisioning services, like regulating services, supportive services, cultural services. All these services are underpinned by the biological diversity or variety or variability of living organism or ecological complexes which they are part of it. Biodiversity, if you see, it includes the number of different native species and individual in a habitat or geographical areas. This is the number of species. Then the second is habitat, ecological complex which they are part of, the variety of different habitats within an area. It not only includes species and habitat, it also includes the interaction which is taking place between the species, between their biotic factor and physical factor, for that is ecosystem. So, the variety of interaction, there are different type of interaction which is taking place, like among the species also, between the species also, and with their ecosystem also. Like there are within the species there are competition, predation, mutualism, there are different type of interaction which is taking place, and among the species also there are mutation is occurring, the mating is occurring, sexual reproduction. So, all these are leading to the different type of diversity changing in habitat, genetic diversity leading to the different type of genetic diversity, species diversity or ecosystem diversity. It also includes the range of genetic variation among individuals within a species. Their genetic variation, when we talk about genetic variation, genetic gene is the heritable unit. It transfers from one generation to another generation. It is found in DNA. If you see that there are 4 bases, adenine, guanine, thymine and cytosine. There are 4 base pairs. These base pairs together form the codon, genetic codon, and there are 20 amino acid, transcription, translation. All these are occurring and there is genetic variation, the transfer of genes are taking place. There are different type of genetic diversity exist among the species. For example, you will find different type of rice varieties. This is example of genetic variation. Different type of mango varieties. This is the example of genetic variation. When we talk about the species diversity, we can see that different species, like there are species of tomato, rice, mango, or any, in that matter, any elephant, birds, etc. There are different species, and there are different organization level by which these are connected. So, there are 3 levels of biodiversity: genetic diversity, species diversity and ecosystem diversity. Genetic diversity is diversity in species, that is species, the diversity within the species is genetic diversity. This is very important for heritable traits to be transferred. Species diversity is a diversity between the species. There are different type of species. Actually, when we talk in general term diversity, the species diversity which we talk is basically we say biodiversity. And then ecosystem diversity, the habitat diversity, or the way there are different type of ecosystem. It may be forest, it may be grass, coral reef or marine, different, the diversity, the variety and variability of diversity that is found is ecosystem diversity. Now, coming to the genetic diversity, the genetic diversity is sum of genetic information which is contained in the genes of individual of plant, animal and microorganism. It is the genetic information which pass from one generation to another generation. If it's astonishing to know that number of genes ranges from about 1000 in bacteria up to 40,000 or more in many flowering plants. Till now, 1.75 million species have been identified, and estimated range of species is 3 million to 100 million. So, there are number of genes which is still has to be identified or located in this biodiversity which need to be identified. If we see the scale of our organization as far as genetic diversity is concerned, the smallest unit is atoms. Through these atoms, they form the molecule. Several molecules, they form the cell. Cell, they are living unit. They together, either they form multicellular organism or unicellular organism, giving rise to individual organism. A group of species together, they form the population, and this makes the genetic diversity. This is the scale of organization: molecule, cell, organism, population and genetic diversity. There are several determinants of genetic diversity. The determinants of genetic diversity can be divided into 3 factors which are interrelated or interconnected. These are abiotic factors. Abiotic factors, the factors are climatic variables, and edaphic factors. We know edaphic factors, edaphic features means soil related factor, climatic variables, temperature, rainfall, etc. Then biotic factor, this is interaction among organisms. As I've told you, there are species interact, there are predation, there is competition and other interaction which is leading to the genetic diversity. And then intrinsic factor, that is population size, mating system, mutation which is most important, and migration, etc., which all is leading to the which are the determinants of genetic diversity. Now coming to the species diversity. Species diversity is diversity between species. Species diversity can again be classified or again can be measured as species richness, species abundance and species evenness. Species richness refers to the number of species. Number of species in a particular area is species richness. Species abundance is abundance of the species. Number of individual of a species in an area is known as species abundance. And species evenness is the equivalent of species which is depicted by abundance, how it is distributed. So, species richness, species abundance and species evenness give a measurement of species diversity. The scale of organization for species diversity is species, then genus, then family, order, class, phylum and kingdom. So, these are the scale of organization for species diversity. I've tried to explain the species richness with an example. Here I have given a table in which there are 2 plots, plot 1 in wood and plot 2 in field. The number of species is, if you see that 4, centipede, millipede, butterfly and ladybug, they are plot 1, there are 4, all the 4 species are present, but plot 2 only 3 species are present. So, plot 1 is having high species richness. If we talk about evenness, then again the species are well distributed in plot 1. So, the species evenness is also more in plot 1 as compared to plot 2. So, species richness, species evenness is an example how rich or how rich species, how much species are present at a particular place. Now coming to the ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem, as we know that it is a system, it is a complex which arises from abiotic component interacting with the abiotic factors, and there is a flow of energy, there is a trophic structure, there is nutrient cycle and so many functional ecological processes and structure and function is defined. So, in the ecosystem diversity, if you see, functional diversity is the relative abundance of functionally different kinds of organism. There may be autotrophs, they may be heterotrophs, they may be macro-consumer, micro-consumer, they may be herbivore, carnivore, decomposer. There are different kind of organism who have functional, different type of functions, different type of role play in an ecosystem. Then there is community diversity, which is the number, size and spatial distribution of communities, and it sometimes refers as patronage. Then landscape diversity is the diversity of scale of patronage. Landscape, if you see, it is a heterogeneous land where there are clusters of ecosystem. For example, in a landscape there may be a forest, there may be a grassland, a pond, then other type of ecosystem. So, there is repeated biodiversity. So, this is a fourth type of biodiversity, that is landscape biodiversity, where they are clustered of ecosystem are found. That's why it's also called scales of patronage or pattern diversity. If we see the scale of organization, ecosystem diversity has habitat, then it forms patches, pattern, ecosystem, biome and biosphere. These are the scale of organization. Now coming to the levels of biodiversity, there are three main levels of biodiversity: alpha diversity, beta diversity and gamma diversity. Alpha diversity is within community diversity. This is a diversity which is within community, and usually it is expressed as the number of species in an ecosystem. The second type of biodiversity is beta diversity. The alpha diversity is within community, beta side diversity is between community, and it is measured as the amount of species change between ecosystem. Beta diversity is measured along a gradient, for example mountain slope. So it is the diversity which is between the community. In a gradient there will be different type of community, so it is between community. Alpha diversity is within community, and gamma diversity is diversity of a habitat over a landscape or over large geographical area. If we see the scope of biodiversity studies, the scope is tremendous. We can see that the backbone of agriculture, animal husbandry, forestry and other applied branches. We depend on biodiversity for our food, fiber, fuel or other basic necessities. So this ever increasing population, they need the diversity to be preserved. They need to maintain the genetic diversity, and to harvest the diversity, the wild relatives need to be preserved, and there is a need to have different breeding methods so that the diversity can be evolved, like different conventional biodiversity breeding method or biotechnology method. Biodiversity as such is very important to reconstruct and restore degraded ecosystem. This is new source of resources. There are different type of resources we are getting for industry. So these are the resources which we are getting from biodiversity. And as far as the branch is concerned, it is the only scientific tool to bridge the social and cultural world, because biodiversity not only include it also include the cultural diversity, ethnicity diversity, so traditional knowledge. So all these all are, it's a bridge which makes the social and cultural worlds. So to summarize, I will say that biodiversity is variety and variability of living organism, is the diversity of at genetic level, species level and ecosystem level. This diversity is of paramount importance for the survival of human beings. This diversity is found in three levels: genetic diversity, species diversity, ecosystem diversity and landscape diversity, and the biodiversity can be measured by alpha, beta and gamma. There are different measures of measuring the biodiversity: Shannon-Weaver index and Fisher alpha, etc. So this biodiversity, species biodiversity, genetic biodiversity, ecosystem biodiversity need to be preserved in a very scientific manner for the survival of human being and this earth and biosphere. Thank you.